This is Nappy Thoughts, a space where we question what we've been taught and try to arrive at an answer. Not the answer, an answer. Let's get into it. Looking into my new life, But to get into it, let me ask you this, because I've been thinking about it. As obviously we've been doing a lot developing going on. This weekend, I've watched a podcast, and that just had me thinking about a few different things. So the one thing in particular I wanted to get at was, or ask you, is it possible that only African Americans or Black people, particularly those whose origin starts here in America, are the only people that can be nappy?
To a degree, I would say. Because even for those whose origins start here, I mean, some people's roots are deeper than ours, even, and they aren't necessarily nappy. So, I mean, to a degree, but
Let me ask you this question. I guess let me back up a second. Where are you from? If somebody asks you where are you from, what is your answer?
where am I from or where am I from?
What does that question mean to you? Like I said, you can give it the answer that a stranger asks you or somebody you meet for the first time versus what you would tell me and what you would think.
No, I mean, yeah, as a stranger, if a stranger asks me, I'm like, you mean, especially if they're Black, I'm like, you mean where am I from or where am I from?
And then if they're Black and they say, where you from?
So then, yeah, my family roots on my dad's side started from Haiti. My mom's side started all the way from the Congo.
And how do you know this?
Genetics. When looked up. Well, not looked up, but then did the test on my history.
So you know it because of like something like Ancestry,
Right.
or something like that. Do you know, have you ever made any connections with any of those people?
No. What even sparked me to do it was talking to my grandfather on my dad's side. And I remember him telling me his grandfather didn't really speak English. And like they came over to the South. And so for his grandfather and his father, it was a bit of a curve, like adapting to the language. And I wanted to know more about his grandfather, I wanted to gain a knowledge of like who he was and basically kind of like where the start of my lineage came from. All of my grandparents got very interesting stories. My granddad on my mom's side being half white, a product of rape. And it was interesting to see how he grew up because he grew up in Nashville and he worked on a farm pretty much his whole life. And the interesting thing with him was, he was supposed to inherit part of the farm because in his will, he said he left it to his children. And literally, the person comes in and breaks down the will, said, well, he didn't mean you. So my granddaddy didn't get shit from his dying. And also, as I got older, I was always kind of interested in like learning his like perspective and just thoughts of life because to grow up knowing, your dad, your mom, and like still I just happen to live on the same plantation, and just you just go through every day like that shit just didn't and was so that's what kind of sparked me to like learn further back of all of my family history.
How far back do you feel like you were able to learn? You mentioned that you were able to trace your DNA roots,
Yeah.
right? But as far as the story, how far confidently were you able to go back?
Shit, not far. um,
Were you able to go beyond Haiti or into Haiti at all, other than knowing that he's from Haiti? Did you actually get a name?
well, yeah. I mean, I got a name from my granddad, and then I looked up him and his father, and wasn't nothing. There's something on the last, like there's something interesting towards my last name, and like there's a kind of the interesting debate on like where my last name origins from.
What they say, French, Gaston?
So that's yeah, partly. Um, and so my name came about one of three ways. So what I also learned was a lot of during, especially like during the rebellion and all that, a lot of Haitian soldiers took the names of like people they killed. So my great great killed somebody and said, "Your last name is not mine."
That's pretty cloudy then, just off that.
And but there's also a possibility that it was translated into Gaston because that was also a thing of some they were converting their names into basically French names. So then there's also that possibility. So yeah, um, very unclear on that. I know my mother and my grandfather's last name comes from what was the Williams and Fletcher plantation in Crow, Alabama, and so then they traced that back all the way to the Congo, but obviously, you know, not really not a name, but not from like a straight name there.
Or even group, tribe,
Yeah,
right? Um, and I asked the question kind of because you answered, and you know a lot more about your lineage than myself, quite honestly. Respect to that. I know really not too much. I know that my great grandfather on my dad's side was Leonard Braxton because my dad's the third. Um, I don't know anything about him. I don't know anything before that. I know that my great grandfather on my mom's side was Ben Smith. I know that a little bit from my granddad. He's still living. He told me his dad name. Or actually, that might have been his granddad name is Ben Smith. So that would be then my great great grandfather. Other than being from Port Gibson, Mississippi, that's as far back as I can go. And like I said, you went a little bit deeper. You made it to Haiti, but that's trustworthy as far as being able to connect the dots. Like you say, that's when the name definitely could have changed for so many different reasons, just off safety and all like that. So tracking it on a name, it always ends in America, some part of America for sure. Like I said, you were able to get the Caribbean side, which is a little bit deeper, and maybe with a little bit more time in history, you might get lucky enough because fortunately, the Caribbean and South America, they always kept a little bit of their blackness, of their African identity. Whereas because of chattel slavery, here in Americas, they did a pretty good job of cutting us off. And you got to dig, as you mentioned, pretty deep, or just got to have a fortunate word of mouth story to go because at some point, the paper trail ends definitely in America, whether it be because we changed our names for safety or whatever. It
it's
ends here and we had to start something new.
Well, yeah, I think it's really hard. It's like you said, next to impossible to go any further past, like basically, from my understanding, the DNA and just like like how it goes is just who my grandparents, like whatever their last name was, they kind of trace that back to, because like I said, my grandmother's last name, obviously she took my grandfather's last name, but her original last name was Fletcher, and that traces all the way back to, like I said, a plantation of Fletcher, which was in Alabama, and you know, um,
But what about her mother? And then her mother's father and mother, you know?
yeah, and so that, I mean, that's where it got traced back to.
Right.
Um,
But how long were they on that plantation? Were they like, it's
right,
just, go ahead.
right. Um, And so, like you said, yeah, it's, that scope is very limited, just because who was really keeping any kind of like actual record.
And I guess the big part of why I asked the question is the the underlining question to that, or the follow-up question to like where we're from, as I'm thinking, as it relates to, obviously our idea of being nappy, being black in America, and all of this is we are from here. So kind of how you mentioned earlier, where I'm from, where I'm from. Like, obviously I moved out of Ohio to the DMV, very international, diverse area, whatever you want to call it. So a lot of the black people who meet me, they ask it assuming that I know I'm from Africa, in a sense of like, in times that I've said like I'm from Ohio, they'll follow up, okay, but where your family from? And I'm like, Mississippi. Like,
Yeah,
I'm I'm born and raised America through and through. That's all I know. Even if I was to trace the roots to somewhere else, I'm only tracing the DNA.
well, but
I'm
see,
not
none of the tradition.
correct. I'm not tracing the culture. Like, it's the culture where that was born, where that started, all of that. It goes back, like I said, to here, some part of the Americas. And that's not the same for them. Their culture comes from Kenya. Their culture comes from Haiti. Their culture comes from somewhere where the place now is a black nation. And what I'm realizing in Nappy is it comes from a white nation, but it's definitely a black thing. And so it's making me think about a question or a phrase, just the concept of like, go back to Africa that white people put on us, or connecting back with our roots that we put on ourselves. And it's like, but what if our roots are actually just here? And what if we're so caught up in trying to reconnect with Africa that we're ignoring who we are, the brand new culture that was created and introduced to the world because of circumstance, right? We didn't like purposely separate ourselves, but they cut us off. The first thing they did a lot of the times when they brought us over here as slaves to the Caribbean and South America originally was cut our hair. And the reason why they cut our hair was because in Africa, hair was a part of the way, along with language, the work we did, whether we were doctors or blacksmiths or herbalists or whatever we did, hunters and things of that nature, skilled, we can, grow plants and things, we did so many things, but the cultures not only spoke different languages, but they wore their hair differently. So your hair in a slave trade was a way to be like, oh, that's family. I know I can look at that brother and automatically, just by looking at you, I know we come from the same region. So they shave your hair. Now y'all all look the same. Now you're speaking different languages. Now it's harder to see the commonalities that you all have amongst each other, constantly separating you. And like, that's just the beginning. So if I don't think anybody would even argue that Black Americans were successfully cut off from the continent, culturally, with our language, our vibes, all that, and had to create something new here. And the thing that is coming to me is Black, is Nappy, is hip hop, but it now defines the diaspora. And so when I look at African Americans or Pan African or, like I said, Nappy, Black, these are American English words that now represent the diaspora. And we created it here. This is our nation. This is our origin country. It's just not a Black nation. So if we love America because this is where we from, like a Haitian loves Haiti, like a Nigerian loves Nigeria, it gets sticky. And trying to explain that to those of the diaspora, or even those from here in America amongst each other, because it's not a Black nation, but we are originated from here. This is all we know. This is our culture. This is our tradition. This is where the names of the grandfathers and grandmothers, the ones that we know, that taught us, that makes us question the world around us, that isn't just something that, yeah, DNA is real, but it's also like, do I trust science all the way? Tuskegee, right? Like, you know, sure, I do trust DNA, but the name changed in Haiti. So I even know, like, it's still going to be more to the story. It's going to get twisted somewhere. And, you know, it leaves us lost without an origin story. But if we embrace that, like, America is the origin, then we do have an identity as a people. Then we do have a country to claim, a nation to identify with, and we aren't so lost. And maybe that's part of, like, the problem as is. The problem.
Well, if the pushback or question to that is, does not that uprooting from our initial origin, like you said, getting uprooted from Africa to America, does none of that carry over into creating and building what is now, like you said, culturally? Because if you say our roots are in America and we created, Nappy, the question is, where does it stem from? What separates us from our white counterparts? If say a Hispanic man is born here, so he came here about 40 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, now they're a few generations in. Does the next child that comes from that lineage, does now his roots I'm just American? Or, was there not something of the lineage that embeds in him to create and continue what is their culture?
So I'm glad you actually went there. I'm glad you used the term uprooted, and I'm glad you went to Latinos particularly. So on the thing of uprooted, in the idea of a plant being completely uprooted and then dying off and put in a different climate, is going to grow differently, right?
Right.
Sure, it brings something back with it, but it's going to grow differently in a whole new environment. It can produce new buds, it can change colors, it can do, and it can, at some point, particular plants look even completely different than what it did in its original environment. It can now need a different environment to grow, different amount of water, different amount of sunlight. And particularly over time, how long it's in a new environment, Now you got two completely different breeds of the same plant. That one that now will not thrive in either environment. It will essentially have to go through that whole transition process again if you uproot it and put it back in its original environment, or if you take the origin and put it into this new environment again, because they've been in separate environments for so long. And that's how you have like different species of like the same plant and all different orchids, there's 20,000 of those things. So on the idea of uprooted like that. And then to the Latino, right? You're right. They're going to bring their culture, but they know the parts of the culture they're going to bring. So they're going to bring essentially the best of that culture. They know what it is. They're going to hold on to it because they thought it was the best. And then they're going to adapt what's new. The argument isn't that we didn't do that. The argument is there's no way to identify what part of the culture that we brought. They took Yoruba, they took Akan, they took Igbo, they took Fulani, and like a whole bunch of other tribes.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know which black ones they brought. But the blackness in us never left, like you're speaking to. But then for us to create a new blackness, a new identity, we didn't just mix the black cultures. We mixed Italian, we mixed Mexican, we mixed French, we mixed German, we mixed Australian. We mixed every single thing we came, Japanese, Chinese, everything we came across in the world in this melting pot. We uniquely mixed that and made a new black. That's now, which is also different than the Latino, which is different than the Asian right now, has a worldwide influence and is leading the world in influence and has been leading the world in influence for a significant amount of time. So that's what's different between us and even other cultures and parts of the diaspora, let alone other cultures in the world in the modern day time. This modern world that we live in right now has been shaped significantly by the black experience in America. Whether you're just talking about hip hop and the way that spread, or you're getting down to the nitty gritty and laws and justice and talk about the United Nations, something that wasn't formed until the 1940s. But the Black Civil Rights Movement, something that came out of that afterwards and was always ongoing since the abolitionist movement that got to the Civil War and changed constitutions and laws worldwide that happened in a free country, affected the world. Like the slave trade in general has always been like the center of what's going on in politics in the world for a really, really long time. So, black bodies have been it. Hot commodity, it's been it. And the one that's been selling the most or been like the most influential ain't even where it's the most niggas at. The most black people in the world still exist in Africa. But where is Africans' influence on the world as black people, other than just as what the resources have been good for, right? Respectfully, not doubting any of them. And same thing with South America and the Caribbean, where their influences on the world have been outside of, being traveling destinations. And when you think about political influence, day-to-day cultural influence, just moral influence, the black woman right now is leading the world on all of that. The way she nurtures, the way she cares, the way she fights, the way she loves. Like, this is it. Everybody is following and duplicating around the world. Look at 2020 and George Floyd and how everybody was protesting like we did back in the 60s. Nonviolent protests across the world. They're copying what we did in the 60s. Today, 60 years later. Like, this is still the best way to fight politically worldwide, modeled after us and originated here in America. And you're right, it had influence, worldwide influence. But who gets the credit worldwide? You can't give the credit to any particular culture, not a single African culture, not no single white culture that we intermix with, none of that. So you have to give it to the culture that was born here, the niggas who were actually fighting for their freedom. And what brings it back is, how did any culture originate where they are? How did Yoruba become Yoruba versus Fulani? How did Italy become Italy versus Germany and France and the UK? At some point, they originated and they were the first of their people. That's what we are here in America. We are the first of our people. We are the first Black people to originate outside of Africa. Everybody else can trace their origin except us. It's always going to be mixed. It's always going to be unclear. It's not the only way we can. And then the bigger part of it on the thing is when it comes to like modern technology, we low key got the most accurate. It don't go back the furthest, but from as far back as we can go, it's clear and cut and dry. And it's digitized even now, saved to the cloud, which is a more privilege than a lot of our counterparts. Not saying that it's underdeveloped nations and things that they don't have, but you know,
Well, I
there's a
think
significant
it's
amount
just
throughout the diaspora that doesn't have it like that.
well, I think for like most outside, it's not a priority as much just because, like you said,
It's always been there.
it's a clear path to like where their lineage, holds. Um, but I do think on different, it's like what separates Italy or what separates Europe from other tribes. I'm mistaken. Most that came to started just from ideology differences in ideology. Um, and like you said, from there, a new tribe was created. From there, well, look, I'm gonna take my people over here. Well, we're not gonna stay here in Germany because I don't really, we got different, so, I mean, that's even like the white function of what to America. We getting out of Britain because these motherfuckers tripping. But I think for us in particular, ours is a bit more unique because this wasn't a difference in ideology. We didn't say, "Hey man, these niggas in Africa tripping. Let's hit a boat." You know, like you said, kind of. I think ours is more an adaptation because again, going back to being like you said, uprooted, and I think you kind of put it in like a perspective of we grew differently from where we would have if we were grown in our natural environment.
You were mentioning how, it's an adaptation that we did here. And I guess for me, like that's fair. But when I think of the like even adapting, I feel like, it's a clear idea of holding on to what you originally were. And what is unique about us in our experience over here was there was when we were born into this crazy world, you know what I'm saying? Like there were parts of us that we knew we had to keep, you know, but parts of us now that we even know that are kind of like natural, like rhythm, our connection with spirituality and things like that. So it's almost like, we don't know where it comes from. We just know we got to be it in some way, some sort, somehow. That's why people all the time, especially even modern days, like, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. Like that's a Black response because, religion was something that was used against us, but spiritual is something that we know is in us. And the
So
thing about the Blackness, like I said, or the origin
what?
of Blackness that I was getting on is like, where did the like Black? There's no country Black. We're the new
Right.
tribe.
Not to segue, but I'm glad you said that because I'm interested in what your thoughts were. A big kind of talking point, obviously, with the Oscars yesterday, and everyone kind of
Yes.
talking about sinners. a big kind of, I guess, debate point for a lot of our people in the black audience. That line from Delroy in the movie where he talks about music and he says, they didn't force this on us like this religion. We brought this from home. And interesting enough, like it's kind of for just it only to be such a short line in the movie that splits so much of us in our thoughts and opinions on the movie. So, what do you? And you kind of mentioned, like you said, parts of us that we held on to through our uprooting. So do you feel, for those that kind of resonated with that line, as those that kind of were kind of turned off and opposed to it because they feel, strongly about the origins of religion and it not necessarily being forced onto them. Do you think that's something kind of similar to like kind of basically almost a submit from the kind of conversation where this initially started about where we are, like where we're from versus where we are?
So when I think about, I'm glad you mentioned the Oscars yesterday, because I think that's it's two parts. It's that line from Sinners that highlights our music. And then I don't know if you saw Ryan Coogler's hair last night with the guitar in it. So this is why I'm like, we're a whole new tribe. Like this is when Delroy says, that's in us, it wasn't forced on us like that religion. We didn't know the English language. And somebody was speaking the Yoruba language, and some people were speaking Fulani. But we understood the rhythm. We understood the hair. There were certain parts of us that could not be destroyed, in a sense. And, so like Delroy said, the music, the soul, we grew up on it. All black people can dance. It's just assumed, right? And so like that's one thing. That rhythm is just something that's a part of what makes you black. Embracing that rhythm and that part of the spirit. But the other one is our hair. Particularly our hair and its texture, its coarseness, and its nappiness and all of that. And so think about it like you're saying, what a lot of people can resonate with it, because think about the black experience in America. Think about what music was to the black experience, and then look at Ryan Coogler and think about what hair was to the black experience. Like, both of those things, if you look at the history, were actually ways that we got free. And so it was very interesting that Coogler, around everything we even doing right now, put a guitar in his hair, put a message in his hair. What did I tell you Nappy was to me? It was always a silent protest. For us, that was a way to communicate with each other without anybody else having any idea. The music, the Wade and the Walter, the Negro spirituals singing on the plantation, slave spirituals, whatever you call them, ways that we were able to communicate amongst each other without them knowing. It was born and created out of necessity, yes, but out of the creativity of having all the different cultures and influences of the world, knowing that, hey, with my tribe, we know how to play the drums. So when I talk to y'all, we can do the drums to this, and then, hey, y'all braid y'all hair, the drums, and then the people with the hair with a certain way, or whatever, y'all do this when y'all hear that part of the drum. People with hair a different way with a different braid signal. They were literally something I even learned in this process, and was like, Maps. They were braiding maps into each other's hair.
Yeah.
That creativity, that which African tribe braid the best? You know what I'm saying? They were probably the ones that were the braider and doing the maps, but then the ones that played the drums the best were the ones there. And out of all that, we made black. And black is an English term. There's not another translation in another language where black means the same thing that it does in the English language. It's literally just the color. Everywhere else, it doesn't come with all these different connotations and what it is. And if it does, it's their language for it. And we don't identify with any other culture's translation of the word. They identify with ours. We don't identify with negro or noir like the French and Spanish words. No, it's black. It's the American English word that's used to represent the diaspora. That wasn't even really used until about 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Dr. King was a Negro. Huey P and them, they were colors and Negroes. They were just now, that's when they started to
Well,
identify the black power, using their hair as afros to reclaim it and identify again, even black power. That was a whole stage. Where is it now? We just had a law change a couple of years ago. You can't, now you can't ban hair in workplaces. Like, think about the ties of oppression of us, particularly as it ties to our hair and the
you
ways
got
that
a
we,
job
like I
interview.
said,
What you need to do, go get your hair cut.
go get your hair cut. And so it's really been a part of like not being nappy has been a way to be accepted, has been a way like they made sure that we were not going to hire nappy people or people
Even
with
I
any
was
type of
yeah, I
hair.
was saying then like even for like the women, it was you got an interview or something with
Perm,
yeah, flat straighten your hair out.
get that perm, you know. And so our hair our hair along with our music
Well, yeah, that's what
has
I was
always
gonna
been
get to.
tied to our identity.
I was gonna get to that because that was something interesting that I learned was, and what I took from that line in the movie also was like that part of that was a huge form of communication, especially like for the underground song. And, and it's kind of funny because even like, let me see, I believe Paul Mooney's one for certain. I know he's was a comedian that kind of talked about white people's interpretation of like, oh, they must like being out here. They singing and they blah blah. And like you said, so like your thought on like what nappy is that creativity of having everybody fooled because they're like, oh, they singing, okay, they having a good old time. Well, let's make sure that they da da da. But really, it's a whole nother. We're creating a whole nother language out of a language we're not even that necessarily familiar with. We're taking rhythm and song to guide and others. Literally, I talked with learned from man who was closely rooted to his origins to the point where he was in about his 60s, and so he was like kind of vaguely remembering, or he still has like written like little signs and messages that his grandparents and stuff wrote to Journey to Freedom because they came all the way from Florida, and first moved to Missouri, then to moved all the way up to like Michigan, and he basically broke down that the songs "Hang Low, Sweet Chariot," like that was a calling, like, hey, in the next hour, we out.
Mm.
And like, so when you see the chariot, or when you see and like that was kind of like the language. So that's the whole point of the song was, hey man, once you see the chariot or you see some this, it's time to go. We out. It's clear.
And again, where does that creativity originate? You know, you understand? Like I said, the Underground Railroad. No one else's path to freedom has been like ours. And again, that's not to say that, to devalue anybody else's at all, but the chattel slavery we experienced here in the United States was unique throughout the rest of the diaspora. It was unique to us. That experience was unique to us. And like I said, so I feel in through all of this, the more I'm learning about it is every other black culture practically in the world can confidently trace something about their culture back to Africa and like a distinct part. There's one's I want to say samba. I'm trying to think of the South American traditions that are like Catholic and African mix. A blend of those, like I said, that they know though, but it's in ours is Christian in a sense, but we don't get because the Christian is such a wide religion. Our Baptist is unique here, but it doesn't get the credit because we're not our own nation. It hasn't actually led to our freedom, I guess, yet. And we still even working on it, I guess, in a sense. In that, like, we the only niggas that ain't all the way free yet. If I had to really look at it historically, we the only ones that are our own nation. And I think the biggest part of it is more so because we've been told, or we're trying to reconnect with Africa.
Well, so
And
I guess here's my opposition or opposing to that.
recreated a culture.
Is it, which, I mean, I don't disagree that some may be trying to reconnect to, like you said, distinctly to Africa. But is it also not on the other end that some are maybe over indulging and adopting into Western European culture?
As opposed to,
As opposed to remaining nappy, as opposed to remaining our culture.
our culture, but that's literally my point of the argument, though. It's we're getting accused of being Western European culture and adapting to their culture when the fact is black culture is a blend of heavy
Right.
African culture and Western culture and is now its own thing and should be accepted as not something that we need to revert from, but something that we need to identify, set standards for, and stay true in. So more so rather than not adapt to Western culture, we need to
Well,
really not like go back into even our 60s culture, but we need to just recognize the culture we have here and unite it.
well, like you said, but it's a blend, and I'm saying with a blend, you said it merges the two. But we all know of some that simply, I mean, there's been
It's
there's every over so often there's those videos of, oh, I'm not black,
But that
I'm not
okay.
like,
So, but okay, that point there. But that's where it's not a blend.
right.
We actually are very distinctly black. We got black cards. And so, but this is what happens. And this is really like the gist of what like I'm coming to, the theory or perspective that I'm coming to. Because everybody's black, right? And we created this thing called black, and we included everybody in the diaspora as black. Now there's confusion if we want to hold black cards and essentially like exclude people for not having the black card or take their black cards away. And so amongst each other, we're like, oh, that's not good and what you should do. And instead, we haven't highlighted and respected
just what that is. And we're not, and it's framed as taking your black card away, rather than asking, how'd you get one in the first place? And respecting how you got one in the first place, in the same sense of a rite of passage. So, what is distinctly present in almost all African cultures, and even most world cultures, is some sort of rite of passage. Whether it's become a man, become a woman. Like I said, the Jews have what, bar mitzvah. Spanish people, for their daughters, have quinceañeras. You know what I'm saying? We know, like, there are African rites of passages in all of the different cultures. So that's just a natural thing to have. And what is not identified clearly is, what is your rite of passage to be black? Right? Some people are like, oh, you have to sing this list of movies. You have to know these songs. Juvenile, Better for the 99 and the 2000. If you don't know that, then you ain't black. Or there's like levels to it. And somebody told us there was a bad thing to divide ourselves like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in the right context, meaning that if they watching us, to divide and be amongst each other is not, because to them, we're all the same. So we need to act as one. We need to be solid, right? But we all know we not the same. We all know that, and we don't care about that. That one a little touch. They special. They got their ways, blah, 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 blah. We naturally accept each other as a people all the time, accept our differences all the time. And so we need to do that in now. So like I said, we're one large nation like Nigeria, but Nigeria as a country, they're all Nigerians, but they got Igbo, Yoruba, and a whole bunch of different tribes in Nigeria. And that's what we need to be in America. Yeah, we are black, but we got a bunch of different tribes in our blackness, and we still all black. It's not like taking away a black card. Is more so like, your black card is red, yours is green, yours is yellow, yours is actually black.
Okay, so card search is interesting, but so, because funny enough, how I've always kind of viewed this topic in particular, literally is just from my family dynamic, but then also what almost didn't feel like a TV show to me, because I related to so much of what they were talking about was the Boondocks. And not necessarily like the subject matter on like what the episode's about, but the dynamic setup where, like you said, there's the family, and there's, the grandpa and the two kids that are black. One is kind of politically, like, politically assertive.
Woke before woke.
The youngest is like the hood nigga black, and then the grandpa is
A grandpa. Old
right,
school.
yeah, black through time.
Right.
Then you have Tom, who is technically black,
Right.
and then you got Uncle Ruckus, who's black but hates being black.
Right. Oreo.
But so that's the thing. I'm like, because so like I got an ass whooping in my early days for because I called somebody an Oreo. My mom whooped my ass for that. She said, don't let me hear you come out your mouth. At the time, I'm thinking she's tripping, but like how like especially like with seeing like that, and I'm like, oh, so other people got that too, because I got like an Uncle Ruckus in my family. I got like a Tom in my family who's, like you said, black, but you don't know how to electric slide, you don't know how to barbecue, you don't know how to do shit. But he's still like family, and he's still like anything we do, he's always there, invited, so on and so forth. And So for me, I never like Uncle Ruckus in my family, and just like on the show, I never disassociate them as like, okay, you not black or your black card is at level one. It was just I've always seen it as how white people see like their racist family member. Like he's just that's just how he.
Mm.
I don't, you know, we don't condone what he does, but he's family.
That's interesting.
So that's how I've always kind of like seen that. That's always how I've seen black. I don't see it as anybody that's less black per se. I just always see them as like, there's always somebody in your family like that.
That's interesting because without, personally, and like I said, realistically, because of this is my perspective, not because I see anyone less than, I do see people as like less black or like more black. More so because as somebody who likes math, I like to try and quantify things. So there is not that it's quote unquote acceptable, but if in the right context, there is a scale of blackness. Right, we spoke about it before, like how many different kinds of black people there are, different times of like niggas. It is if you just say nigga, like if you say it in a different way, it's gonna mean a different thing, and that's really kind of what blackness is to me. So it's been on like a scale, not that any is like higher than anyone else, but they're just categories. They're just like different kinds of blackness. Like you just mentioned about the Boondocks, right? There's Riley, there's Huey, there's Granddad, there's Ruckus, there's Tom. And in the black
Sure.
community, it's clear none of them are the same. But outside of the black community, what's the difference? And
All right.
so
So how would you scale them?
so I would, in the way that we scale them, right? Huey nigga. Or excuse me, Riley nigga. Huey, woke nigga. Or no, all right, let me put it like this. Riley, street nigga. Huey, woke nigga. Granddad, old head. Ruckus. What we call Ruckus?
Uncle Tom.
That one's yeah, okay. But then what we call Tom, right?
White nigga.
Tom's the Oreo.
Yeah.
Tom's the Oreo. Ruckus is the Uncle Tom. There it is. And so, or Coon, more even so. Ruckus more so a Coon than I think even Uncle Tom. He
Yeah.
definitely a Coon. And so, but like that's how I would scale it. And as black people, I don't honestly think any is quote unquote better or worse than the other, right? Nobody wants to be a Coon. But also, no black person created a Coon. The woke nigga. The street nigga. No black person created the old head in the sense that we are all products of our environment, right? If we had a choice, we would be a griot. We would be all these different traditional African positions if we had a choice. And that's the scale that we would still live on, but we didn't have a choice. And so we had to create a new scale. And these are the ones that were created by our environment, by the pressures. Like, this is what happens, the diamond was created, but we're a whole new stone. It's a whole, and particularly here in America, I mean, like, that's where we're brand new in the sense, in the black world. And we're so new to the black world that other black people in the diaspora who've had traditions that outlast ours are now adopting ours. And so for so many years, right, we adopted or mixed, evolved, whatever you want to say it, all of their traditions. But we finally made a new one. And now they're adopting ours on top of theirs. Now they're protesting like we're protesting. Now they're listening to music and dancing like we dance and listen to music and integrating and stuff like that. Like, we've been doing it over there for years and now they're showing us where it originated from, but they weren't showing the world. You know what I'm saying? They're now doing the backward, giving us a sample, but we put it out there. and they're copying our style of our access of how to put it out there. This is the platforms you should use. This is the style you should do it. Like, follow our lead of influence, and then you can now have your own influences in the world. And, you know, got the kids dancing from Africa and stuff to the Michael Jackson videos I see all the time. You got Afro beats and things like this growing and stuff like that. But all of that stuff is modeled after what we did here. And so we modeled what we were doing here so long off of what we've seen in other places, and now they're copying us. Now they're copying black. They ain't copy the Negro. They ain't copied the colored folk, but they copying us black people. They ain't even copied the African American, but they copying black. And that was born and that originated here. They didn't create that. Otherwise, it'd be in Fulani or Yoruba or Spanish because the Dominicans created it, or French because the Haitians created it. So we'd be saying this, we will still be saying negro. We would still be saying, we would be now saying noir. And, you know, and maybe the niggas who was under the Spanish influence were kind of leading the world liberation of niggas when it was Negro. And we were proud to be a Negro because that was the Spanish word for black. So maybe in the islands in South America where most niggas outside of the diaspora were, maybe the Spanish identity of blackness was the one that we wanted to associate with here in America as Negroes, but then we created our own. And now it's black. And now that's the one that everyone in the world wants to associate with. Because all this shit that was going on this side of the Atlantic was unique at that point in world history. And most of the niggas are in South America, which is Spanish and Portuguese heavily. With, you know, it's not the most in the Caribbean, no, but that was a lot of our first stops, whether we went south or went north. But a lot of our first stops where we got what they used to call it seasoned happened down there. And so I'm not shocked, you know, the Haitian Revolution, the French and Spanish island of Hispaniola, which is now Haiti, and the Dominican Republic, all one island. Like, you know what I'm saying? We might have been proud to be a Negro, and then we changed it and made motherfuckers proud to be black. And, you know, that's how I see the evolution of history. And as it even particularly ties to our nappy hair, because nobody even in other cultures associates their hair with nappy the way that we do. They haven't used it as a part of their justice movement in the way that we did through the Black Power movement and reclamation. And so when I think of like nappy, I'm like, they tried to erase our history, but we grew it back. They tried to take our identity, but we grew it back. They tried to take our language, but we grew it back. They tried to take our culture, but it grows back. And, you know, it grew back as black, grew back as nappy, hip hop, jazz, blues, you know, fried chicken, collard greens, pig feet, chitlins, and all of it. You know, the Dougie, Soulja Boy. I mean, that's how I see it.
Yeah. So
Shit about to die, so we gotta wrap it up. So I think, well, at the end of the day, like, we'll have to, if we really came down to the point, we have to accept some leaders, we gotta draw some guidelines, gotta make it make sense, essentially. Like I said, we gotta present scales, categories of people that are accepted, generalized, and then we just as the people have to function under them. And I think what's holding us back, essentially, of like having done that yet and why we aren't a nation is because that question, everybody's worried about who's going to be the one to identify what black is, rather than identifying what black is. And now they're trying to say whose definition is accepted, rather than defining it. And we need it to be defined first. We need it to be defined in general. We need it to be defined and debated and talked about in order to figure it out of like what it is, instead of allowing other people to lead that conversation, lead the definition in the meeting. And until we can kind of like reclaim what it means to be black and stop letting white people debate about it and us entertain these debates and act like anybody else can define it for us, if and that's kind of even where I'm at on this particular point. I think the time comes now that we as black Americans have to separate ourselves in the diaspora as black Americans and stop, in the sense of, not stop trying to reconnect to Africa because
You saw
we're
where I was
lost
moving
here.
to.
Stop trying to, identify or, feel guilty that we can't connect with Africans and they treat us some type of way when they come over here and blend, and like accept that that is what it is because we are who we are, and like just be it. And we're still trying to define what it means to be black. So we have a significant amount of us doing DNA, not saying anything even to you, but doing the DNA test, trying still to identify what our own blackness is outside of where we are. And because that's what everybody else is able to do. And the big thing I got from Joy's podcast on with the 154 joint was she mentioned there are like three different type of black people who are affected by slavery. She was like the black people who were enslaved in Africa, the black people who were enslaved in the Caribbean and South America, and then the black people who were part of a chattel slavery in the United States of America. And the other two of that three, the South Americans and the Caribbeans and the ones who were enslaved in the country, all have roots to the country. We were the only ones who were successfully cut off, and we originated here. Our culture as we know it today originated here. And so we're looking for identity outside of here, like I said, with the Congo, with Nigeria. Hell, I even want to know what part of Africa I'm actually from. But at the end of the day, the only culture, the only tradition that I have to teach my children is 100% American. 100% born in
Oh,
America. When I tell him where he goes, his lineage, and I can actually tell him a name that impacted my life personally, not just like a name, but a physical body, is going to be here. And it's only even going to be here for that person's physical body. Like, I don't have anyone who lived life outside of this country to say that they've impacted my family's influence. I don't have a name. I don't have a knowledge. I don't know where they're from. So we're 1,000% American. And I am an American African more than I am an African American. Like, I think truly black people in America, particularly the ones who can't go no further than slavery on this
well,
side, are the first Africans to originate outside of Africa
I would challenge
in
on
world history.
that
Not maybe first, but
the
whatever.
point of like learning your lineage isn't necessarily to go and like reconnect. Like I said, because like my other side of the roots kind of originate back to the Congo. I have no interest in like connecting with the Congo, but more so to learn and appreciate the road that got to me, because all the people before me did have to pay that had to pay that sacrifice for me to be here. So that was my intent of learning where my like ancestry and all my traces come from, because while like you said I may not have personally knew them or physically, their name means something to me because it got me here, and I don't want to undermine that to any degree. You know, on my grandmother's side, the they could take it to from the Williams Fletcher plantation was Althea Fletcher. And like I said, that name doesn't necessarily to me, but it's important to me because you were the start of this journey. To that now it's not even, it doesn't even stop at me now. Now this passes on into my kids and so forth. Everybody paid a price to be here, and so
Correct.
that was so to at least take the time to know and acknowledge them, and pay my respects in a way by learning learning about them, trying to look them up, and just for the appreciation of like you did what you did that led us, whatever your vision was, man, it got us here.
And I guess I'm speaking to that not in saying like there's nothing to learn, but that as like that's our people as a whole right now. We're seeking to identify like what got us here for the sake of that appreciation. And I guess more so what I'm getting at is okay, when we can identify it, then what? How do we show the appreciation? And in the sense of like what you even just said, the culmination of it is they got us here, and where is here? And it's important, I think, for us as a people to answer that question because, as you mentioned now, here is what we have to pass down. Here is now the origin story for the rest of us after us so they don't have to ask these questions. Right? You're asking them now, getting all that information, trying to figure out where it's come. So then now you can pass that down in one generation. And now it doesn't take however many generations before us to finally figure it out and like be able to pause for a second and look back and be like, whew, how'd I got here? Because we've been running for so damn long. We can finally like stop, settle, and be safe as a people. And now, like I said, set up that next generation. And so how do we do that? Like I said, where is here? How do we describe this place that we woke up in? You know what I'm saying? After having our eyes closed, being in a coma for so many years, bodies being moved around and displaced, and now we finally woke up somewhere that we can call home, that we can identify, get used to and learn, build families in, pass down generations, create something, build cultures and all these new things and like restart. And like we've hit a full restart as a people. One of few cultures in the whole world that have had like a real legitimate opportunity to do that. Most cultures get completely wiped out. And most cultures don't get uprooted from one place and put into another. They usually travel there and leave a trail along the way. But we came across a fucking ocean. Trail was lost, cleaned up by sharks. And then when we hit land, hit 1,000,001 waves. And so shit got lost. And we had to like reclaim and literally like not even like the idea of rebuilding a culture is crazy. And I guess what the concept of it is though, like China's fucking thousands of years old, but at one point it was brand new. And like we are in a sense a new China, a new Nigeria. We're a whole new nation in our own history, and we actually haven't even got our freedom yet. And that's what I get from Sinners. That was the one thing that resonated with me the whole movie was freedom. Freedom. And then I'm really like looking at that like, what is it for real? Are we actually free just because we're no longer on a plantation? And so what does it mean to be free? What does it take to be free? Not just to be comfortable, but to be free. And, shit, that's why I ain't the gig anymore. Like, it's a whole different feeling and a whole nother level of, like, being free versus being tied down. It's like, yeah, I was showing up every day and actually having to confine myself or be reserved not say things because I wasn't free to say these things. And it's like, damn, are you what is really freedom? And in order for us to find that as a people in America, I think, like I said, we have to realize that in the diaspora, we're the only ones that ain't free. Yeah, we got the most privileges, but we're not free. It's not our nation. And the question you asked though, and who gets to say it, it's not so much as who gets to say it as much as it is what does it take to build a nation. And if we trying to build a nation, we can't be worried about who gets to say it. We just got to be worried about what's being said. And if we were focused on what's being said, then we all can say it as a people. And it doesn't matter who it is. If it's something that we all can unite on and all can say, and who delivers the message, whoever wants to be the leader that now has to take on the responsibilities as leading to, not the responsibility of creating the message or identifying what's blackness, but we'll get there. But like I said, man, the biggest thing I want anybody to take away from this particular conversation, if there's anything I wanted anybody to take away from my idea of being nappy that really kind of started this conversation in my own right, or this thought, it's the whole concept of hair in itself, our American Black experience as it ties to hair and how we've used it, and the simple fact that they try to destroy our history, they try to destroy our culture, they try to destroy our identity. But just like our hair, it continues to grow back. And we braid it, we style it, we do whatever we want to do with it. And they always ask to touch it because they have no idea of how we continue to do it. So yeah, man, this has been Nappy Thoughts with your man, the Rainmaker Jake Gaston, and your boy, Zab, the Nappy OG and the Nappy CEO. This was good. Until we meet again, keep it nappy.